Welcome to JMC Live. This is Friday, 11/26/2010, and yesterday was Thanksgiving. This is going to be our second Thanksgiving special. We had the pre-Thanksgiving show the other day, and now we're going to have the official Thanksgiving show tonight. I covered last week the history of what Thanksgiving was in the beginning, and where have we gone in present day? What reflects and looks like Thanksgiving? Yesterday, I did make a post today about giving and thanks, and I talked about my humble, as the tears were flowing yesterday, practically all day, and part of today. I've cried over various different things: society, the economy, the homeless, the sick, the poor, and then the people that are hurting in the families. I think those are the most invisible people that, and I don't think people in general know how to address the family's issues. You see comedians talking about redneck families, and you see other people discussing about how they are different and who gets on your nerves, but you never hear anyone say, well, we have family and we get together and we hold hands and we pray and we ask questions and we fasted or we invited friends over. You don't hear about these kinds of stories. And I ask the question, why? I think it's quite simple why you never hear about people coming over and giving and thanks, because the whole thing is about stuffing your face as much food as you possibly can. I remember when I was a child, that's what I was taught. I was taught, Thanksgiving, it's the one day you're going to have all the food that you ever wanted, all the pies, all the everything, and you're just going to eat. So then the next day you're sick, and you're supposed to, tell your mom, oh, Mom, I really want you to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning after cooking all that food at 4 o'clock in the morning the day before, and go get me something. It's all about I, and it's not about us. And the next few weeks, whether you're a Christian or not, there is, as you see behind me, and I don't know how much you can see it, but it says seasoned greetings up here. I have this up here for a reason, because it's the most universal term that people understand, and it is a season. The word season, I love having Lowry seasoned salt on my food, my steaks and things. And the Word of God is very clear about seasoned greetings. He says that you should be the salt of the earth, and that you should be the light of the world, to counteract the darkness of the things that have come into here. If you look at Hebrews 6:1, it says, let us leave the elementary teachings about Christ and go on to a mature way of thinking. 1 Peter 2:2 says, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation. I think it's time for not just the American people, but the world to grow up, to learn how to be seasoned in how you greet. Because I don't look at the word seasoned greetings as season's greetings, happy holidays. I look at it as you should be seasoned so that you can be able to greet the many people, because this is supposed to be a time of blessing. It starts with Thanksgiving, where you're supposed to be able to go to the most simplistic, basic form of life, which is, I'm thankful that I'm alive. I'm thankful that we have food on the table, and we're not, starving, and we're having a better way of living. Now, I know there's a lot of people that listen to the show who cannot actually say they have a better way of living. They can't say, I can put food on the table. I can't go buy a turkey. They're like, they had to wait until the day when it was 49 cents, and they're going to have to get like maybe a 5-pound turkey, or get one of them small cooked meals. Or like some of my friends, and I do have friends, that ate the Salvation Army yesterday because they couldn't afford for their families and friends Thanksgiving turkeys. I want to share with you what I want to call now. I'm going to call this little segment Memoirs of a Thanksgiving Meal. And you're probably wondering, why am I calling this Memoirs of a Thanksgiving Meal? It's quite simple. For those of you who don't know, and this is what the show is supposed to be about. The show is supposed to be about my testimony, and I want to start at this point in this season. Thanksgiving, holidays, Christmas were utter hell for me as a child. Not always, but when I was a little kid, my mother was on food stamps and Medicaid. My grandmother was on food stamps and Medicaid. Social Security. My mother was on Social Security. One day, my mom decided to get drunk and take her little blue car, went down into Texas, ran around a corner, lost control of the vehicle, went through the fence, and hit a cow. Another cow landed on top of the vehicle. Now, a car hitting a cow sounds quite funny. But when you saw this car, the whole top end was shrunk in. You couldn't go through a door. The window and the hood was smashed. In fact, my mother was hit so hard in that accident, she was thrown out of her seat, and she was stuck underneath the seat of the driver and passenger. It ripped off a door. If it did not rip off the door, she would have been trapped in this vehicle. My mother, at this point, crawls out of the car. This is 1970-something. Before I was ever alive. And she crawls what she considers a half a mile, which might have been less than that, on her stomach, crawling with her hands, tearing her whole body's all tore up. And she knocks on the door and she passes out. Next thing she remembers, they wake up, she's at the hospital, and they've taken bone out of her back and put it in her hip because she shattered her hip and some other things, and she was permanently disabled at that point. So my mother wasn't able to work. So I was one of those kids that you saw that went to the Salvation Army and Toys and Tots, and you got Christmas trees from the Salvation Army, and you would go and get Thanksgiving meals from the Salvation Army because all you have was food stamps, and depending on, we had regular groceries that we needed to buy because I was in school, because I needed to bring lunch, and it was Thanksgiving dinner or does Jeremy have lunch? So they chose to take care of me. So growing up poor, I didn't have the great internet as everyone did. We didn't have that in the 80s. But I did get cable. It was small, like 15 channels. And I did get a home furnished by HUD and FHA and all that. So it was a small little home. Just me, my mother, and my grandmother. If you're wondering about my father tried to kidnap me when I was born. He beat my mother and was pretty bad all-around guy. So my mom went 10 years without dating a man, and went 10 years without, being involved in an intimate relationship. And then in junior high, I got involved in Boy Scouts. And she decided to date someone. And that led to other relationships and other sexual relationships, which I was able to either hear or see because she was so drunk and wasted because she started drinking again, smoking pot, and participating in orgies. So that was how my first sexual experience ever happened, was seeing all these activities. That's in the 5th grade. So my mom leaves and chooses a man over taking care of her own mother, who's in a wheelchair, disabled, over the age of 65, and her own child, who's 12 years old. She goes to another town in Texas called Beaumont, and through this little few period, because this new man was just like my father, he was abusive, verbally abusive, physically abusive, all those wonderful things. And, he offered me Playboy, he offered me this, and he offered me drinks and all this other stuff, and I turned down the drinks, but I took the Playboy and shot a gun and all that kind of stuff kids did. My mother was no longer known as my mother. My mother was now known as a female dog. That's what I referred to her when I talked about her in junior high. No, I wasn't always following God, folks. I didn't really have a true relationship with Jesus Christ until much later in high school. So my mom left for that, and I started taking care of myself. I raised myself. And in the titles of Memoirs of a Thanksgiving Meal, I remember cooking my own Thanksgiving meal. And I remember my mother coming over, my stepfather coming over, drunk, and fights and police and all those kinds of activities and things that would happen. And I know there's people right now who can relate to this story, and there's other people listening to the story, and they say, there's just no way, Jeremy. You just don't look like the stereotypical, quote, unquote, you're just not one of those kind of people, Jeremy. It doesn't make any sense. Well, back then, there was no one to wash the dishes. There was no one to clean the house. I was the dirty, smelly boy that went to school. When you watch the Peanut Show and you see a little kid with a little dust all over him, I was that kid. My grandmother wasn't completely in her right mind. I'm 13 years old. I didn't care. I didn't do anything. I was a wild child in that form. Sexually, the internet did not exist, so I didn't have to worry about that. But we had scrambled HBO and Cinemax. So because there wasn't a mother around, I started watching that at night. And it got pretty bad. Every holiday I feared, yet at the same time I wanted my mother around. I wanted the comfort of knowing that family still could happen in the midst of the adversity of things. You can see how God was working on me even back then with the coin phrase that I use now about adversity going through the fires and flames of life. Too many people, and this is what I can personally say because this is my message that God has given me. Everyone takes advantage of their life. They take their family and their friends and their jobs for granted. Because there's too many of us who have not dealt with that kind of tragedy. Everyone deals with death. Everyone deals with loss. But when you lose your family like I have, because they're no longer living. So then in high school, we have this nice older lady. She's like 74 years old. And she starts coming to my door while I'm in class. And that's how I got invited to church. A 74-year-old woman took me to church. I got involved in youth group, rededicated my life, the whole bit, and started getting involved in praying. And you know what? At that point in high school, I said, I really want to serve you, God. And he said, you know what? How bad do you want to serve me? He said, you need to seek me, and you need to come find me. Knock, ask, and it shall be given to you. I said, well, how do you knock and ask? He's like, well, if you're not reading, Jeremy, God told me, and you don't have me available. And this is when cell phones were starting, so God was telling me, well, you don't have a cell phone, but you have the Bible. This is the only cell phone you need, Jeremy. And I don't have the version, but I had an older version of Bible Promises for You. And I also had an NIV and a New King James Bible. I went through 3 Bibles from age 8 to age 17. They all fell out. Pages fell out. When we return, I will tell you more about my story and a memoir of a Thanksgiving meal.